You sick sons of bitches. I mean, you walk in that door on your two legs all fat and cocky and looking at me in my chair, and you tell me it's all in my head? I hope that both of you have sons, handsome, beautiful, articulate sons who are talented and star athletes, and they have their legs taken away. I mean, I pray you know that pain and that hurt.
Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby. Don't you put that on us. You are not paralyzed.
I am so paralyzed.
No.
Rough on him now.
No, he needs to know.
Okay.
He's always crying.
Tough love it is, tough love. Wake up, idiot.
You want to know what I am? You want to see what my life is?
Don't do it.
You want to see what's going on here?
Don't you stick that knife in your leg.
Ah!
Sabotage. Sabotage is the theme for this video. Did Woody Johnson sabotage this year with the New York Jets? The conversation needs to be had because last night The Athletic dropped another article, and it's by Diana Rossini, Zach Rosenblatt. I'm sure there's a lot of opinions about their type of reporting, but whoever they have inside the Jets facility has been there for a while, and they hate Woody Johnson. They absolutely hate him because this article really throws him under the bus. Now, some of these things are probably conflated. Some of them may be misconstrued, but the general purpose here shows that Woody Johnson was not only making changes now, but he was making changes at the middle of last year. Now, don't get me wrong. I made a video about Joe Douglas getting fired. I think he should have gotten fired because even before this article claims that Woody started meddling, Joe Douglas did not put together a competitive team. He had 3 years at that point to actually put together a team that could compete, and he failed at that aspect. So maybe Woody felt like he had to get involved at this point. But anytime you get a owner meddling as much as Woody Johnson does in this article claims, you're going to have bad things. You're going to have a season like we're looking at right now. Now, the article is behind a paywall, so I'm not going to show it here, but I'm going to read off some excerpts. I have some screenshots on our Twitter account, our X account, if you want to see them there, but I'm not going to actually post them here like I usually do on some of our articles. I'm not going to have it to the side here. But you know what, Diana and Zach, I am now a subscribing member to The Athletic. I had to do it at this point because I had to read this article. So good job on that. You got another subscriber. Okay. Anyway, the article basically starts out saying that Woody Johnson yesterday, Tuesday, Woody Johnson made practice yesterday mandatory. I don't remember any time a owner actually making a practice mandatory going into a bye week. It just doesn't make sense. So you knew something was going to happen. And then what was happening that day was that they were going to fire Joe Douglas. Now, it turns out that this was in the works for a while. Going back to the middle of last year, it seems like Douglas had already lost some of his power. So I'm going to read you an excerpt here. Douglas had already lost some power midway through last season when Johnson took a more active role. Example, Douglas had a contract extension offer he was getting ready to propose to defensive end Bryce Huff's agent, but Johnson vetoed it, and any other moves involving paying new money to players on the roster. By January, Douglas seemed to have less control. That's when he fired assistant general manager Rex Hogan, a move that shocked many in the organization because of how close Douglas and Hogan and their families were. Multiple team sources theorized that Johnson forced Douglas's hand. In that aftermath, Douglas told Jet staffers that Woody should just fire me now. In February, Director of Player Personnel Chad Alexander left for an assistant GM job with the Los Angeles Chargers. Johnson did not allow Douglas to replace either of them. From then on, many in the Jets organization described Douglas as a shell of himself. First off, you are vetoing money. you are hampering the GM to do his job in the middle of last year by not bringing back certain players that maybe should have been here. The only example that they have is Bryce Huff, but then it goes on to say involving other players on the roster. So we don't know how far this went. We don't know what other players are involved, but it's clear that the GM duties were being stripped away from Joe Douglas at the middle of last year. And then in January, Woody fires Rex Hogan and then does not allow Joe Douglas to hire a replacement for Hogan or hire a replacement for Chad Alexander. So now you're neutering Joe Douglas more. And you're probably putting more on his plate because now his staff he's not allowed to replace his staff. So the writing was on the wall, I think, for Joe Douglas at the middle of last year when he realized his job was being taken over by the owner. Again, don't get this twisted. Joe Douglas should have been fired because of previous years of not being able to put together a competitive team, not fixing the offensive line, missing on Mekhi Becton, missing on Zach Wilson. You don't miss on a left tackle. You don't miss on a franchise QB and retain your job. But it seems like Woody Johnson tried to take over this team and basically sabotage this season, when we all thought everybody was going to get a redo because of Aaron Rodgers' injury. It seems like Woody Johnson soured on Aaron Rodgers, soured on Joe Douglas, soured on Robert Saleh at the beginning of last season. And maybe that has to go back with Joe Douglas not getting a viable replacement for Aaron Rodgers when he went down. It's possible. Some other moves that it seems like Woody Johnson nixed. They wanted to bring in Jerry Jeudy and offered Alan Lazard as a draft pick, as compensation in a trade. That got nixed. I think we can all say I'd rather Jerry Jeudy than Alan Lazard. Would you? I would. Talking about Tyron Smith. Woody Johnson pushed for Tyron Smith. Tyron Smith has been a complete disaster. But Woody Johnson went along with it and gave him way more money than nobody was offering Tyron Smith anything, because Dallas knew that he was washed up at that point. But Woody Johnson pushed for it. Woody Johnson did not want Mike Williams. Joe Douglas pushed for Mike Williams, and we know what happened with him. He's gone. Likely at this point due to Woody probably pushing him to get traded. Woody Johnson then meddled again with Hassan Reddick. And whatever he did with the Eagles to get that money situation figured out, now Hassan Reddick's in here, but Hassan Reddick has been a disaster. If it wasn't obvious how involved Johnson was in the operation before the season started, it became clearer in October. I'm reading from the article now, when Saleh was fired. Johnson explained that he felt the Jets had the most talented roster in the franchise had assembled in 25 years as owner, and he wanted to find the spark before it was too late, promoting Ulbrich as interim head coach. The line about the roster talent was presumably an endorsement of the work Douglas had done over the past few years, but multiple sources within the organization viewed it as more of an endorsement of the roster that Johnson felt that he built, not that Douglas built. On October 15th, Johnson pushed Douglas to trade for star wide receiver Davante Adams, giving up a conditional third-round pick, far more than any other team traded for a top wide receiver at that deadline. The next day, Johnson told reporters at the owners' meeting in Atlanta that, thinking is overrated. You have to look forward. Again, Joe Douglas deserved to lose his job for many reasons, but the rot goes all the way to the top. You can't have an owner taking over the GM's job and then expect to win games. You can't. On Sunday, the Jets bench starting safety Tony Adams at the behest of Johnson. Why is Johnson making decisions of who to bench? I'm serious, does Johnson even know who Tony Adams is? Seriously. What does that help? Now you're making coaching decisions. Douglas wasn't technically hired by Woody Johnson, but rather his brother Chris Johnson, the team's vice chairman, who ran the organization for 3.5 years while Johnson was working in the Trump administration as ambassador to the United Kingdom. Many in the organization were under the impression that when Johnson returned in 2021, he wouldn't be involved so much in the day-to-day. Fast forward to Douglas's last news conference, he was asked about being kept out of the decision to fire Saleh. And his response, "I serve at the pleasure of the owner." Owners are supposed to hire the people to run the team and then get out of the way. And it seems like Woody did that at least for the first 3 years, and it didn't go well. What I take from this article is that Woody was probably desperate, and he wants to win. We know Woody wants to win. We want to win too. But you cannot make decisions like this when you can't make decisions like this when you have an Aaron Rodgers coming back and you're basically giving everybody a redo. But you're neutering the GM by not letting him bring back Bryce Huff. You're neutering him by not letting him pay other players on the roster. And then you fire his assistant GM and don't allow him to hire a replacement? If Woody was going to do that, he should have gotten rid of Douglas in the offseason last year. It makes no sense to neuter your GM, fire his assistants, and then allow him to continue all the way up until the bye week this year. It doesn't make any sense. I'm as confused about it as you are. You had the trifecta this year. You had a trifecta really this entire era. You had a bad GM, you had a soft head coach, and you had a meddling owner. And you wonder why this team hasn't made the playoffs in the last 14 seasons. Woody, we know that you watch what's going on social media. We know that you pay attention to what the fans are saying. I am begging you, hire someone who knows what they're doing and get out of the way. Hire a coach that has a big personality that can change the culture, and then let them do their job. I really hope that Woody ends up in the Trump administration, ends up as an ambassador somewhere, but before that, they pick someone that can run the organization effectively. Because the Jets are not a destination right now. Who in their right mind, GM or coach, is reading this article and saying, "Yeah, I want to work for the New York Jets. I want to work for Woody Johnson"? It just stinks. It stinks from the top down to the bottom. And the only way they're going to get this right is if they pick someone that knows what they're doing and pick someone that has that personality to change the culture. We can only hope. We can only hope.